Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a licensed professional counselor and owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves and life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So you might want to put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. I am so excited that you decided to join me today. In this episode, I want to explore several different types of emotions we experience as humans and ways to reframe those experiences to help us understand our reactions. Our emotions are not random or useless, and even though we might wish we didn't have to feel some of them, they are there for a reason. We do not want to ignore or push down our feelings, even though that might be our gut reaction, because this is how pressure builds. Instead, we want to be curious with them and what they're trying to tell us. This episode, I want to share how I've changed my perspective and language around why I feel what I feel, and maybe build some insight around what comes up when it does. So invite curiosity into this space. Forget everything you think you know about why you're feeling something, and let's see if we can build some insight today. There is this belief that I keep hearing, and it is, I want to be happy all the time, and if I'm not happy, there is something wrong with me. This isn't true. Happiness is an emotion, which means we cannot feel it 100% of the time. In fact, if you met someone who is happy all day, every day, you might wonder what's wrong with them, because it doesn't feel or look natural. It isn't natural. It's not human. Humans have a full spectrum of emotion for a reason. It helps us know our reactions to different events, helps us connect to others, and often these emotions show up as a cue for some survival mechanism, at least in my opinion, and in the adaptive information processing model that I follow. Humans are not the only ones who feel emotions, too. Animals do as well, though some people struggle to see it. And they are good at reading our emotions. Studies show that horses turn their heads one way or another depending on which feeling the human in front of them is emoting. Dogs who have been trained to sit in MRIs show their brains light up with happiness and love when they see their humans. Animal-assisted therapy exists because animals have incredible empathy and can usually pick up on how we humans are feeling better than we can. Now, if our emotions were useless or just getting in the way, everything I just said wouldn't matter. Every single one of us, animals included, would just be big failures, all having these feelings all the time. So instead of beating ourselves up for feeling a certain way, let's explore why different feelings might exist and what makes them show up in different scenarios. I'm going to start with the emotions that we tend to want to feel, even if it's just on a logical level. Comfortable emotions, at least those that we believe are supposed to be comfortable, such as happiness, joy, peace, are often reminders that we are safe, that life is going well in this moment, that the experience that we are going through is aligned with our values or who we want to be. These emotions can be great cues for what we want to do more of in our lives and give us answers about what is missing. For example, anytime I am laying on the carpet with Juliet giving her belly rubs, or taking her for a walk, or watching her sniff the wind, my heart swells. If you can't tell, I love animals. Anyway, I feel joy, peace, love, happiness, all at the same time. Every time I am in one of those moments, I just want more of it. And that feeling helps me know that. Or the other day, I took an embroidery class with a bunch of women, which you'll hear more about in 2 weeks. And we were all just chatting about life, the world, ourselves, and where we were at. Everyone was so kind, accepting, supportive. I felt so comfortable in that space. And in that safety, I was able to discover a new hobby. And I've started embroidery on my own ever since. I was filled with contentment, happiness, and love. I knew it was a good space for me to be in because I felt these things. It's also true that sometimes we struggle to sit in comfortable emotions. If we feel a moment of peace or happiness, our brains might immediately jump to "this won't last," or "I am missing something. When will the other shoe drop?" The thing about these kinds of reactions is that they're just automatic thoughts from a part of you that is used to the chaos of anxiety or uncertainty in your environment. That doesn't mean that the peace is a lie, or that you shouldn't let yourself be happy when you're feeling happy. It is a cue that your body has learned that these kinds of emotions are not safe and that you need to build safety before you can truly feel them. Now, I also want to state here that that can be a hard process. It's not just, oh, I've learned this thing happens. Now I can just decide to let myself be happy. It could take weeks, months, years, depending on how much your body has gone through and how much your nervous system is trying to keep you safe in those moments. Building safety can be really complicated and really scary sometimes. But if you can do that work, it's pretty incredible. And I want to say that this still shows up for me when I'm juggling a lot of different tasks or expectations. And after a while, I notice that I get stuck on a loop. Now, I've named it a loop for me because that's kind of how it feels, like I'm just stuck in this belief system. And when this happens, whenever I try to slow down or rest, I catch myself looking for what I'm missing, feeling guilt for taking a break, or noticing a lot of shoulds in my thoughts. If that resonates for you, the best advice I can give you, besides go to therapy, is to slow down for an extended period of time and do all your tasks slower. Do the dishes slowly. Put your laundry away while taking dance breaks. Instead of going for a run, try a walk. Physically slow down so that your mind can slow down too. When we're feeling rushed, we move faster. The way to stop feeling rushed is to give yourself permission to slow down. Try to find ways to take the pressure off, or small moments where you can let yourself exist without expectations of how you're supposed to show up, even if you are feeling down or anxious. Let yourself show up that way too. The more you can just exist, the more your nervous system will heal and become regulated, and the easier it will be over time to sit in feelings like joy. Maybe the first feeling you try to find is something neutral, the lack of discomfort, feeling no stress, feeling no pain. Maybe you're not feeling happy yet, but maybe you can celebrate that you're not panicking and let yourself build from there. Now, we're going to spend a bit more time talking about those uncomfortable emotions because those are the ones that a lot of us struggle to deal with. Even if we struggle with the comfortable ones too, we also probably struggle with feeling uncomfortable emotions. And we are much better at identifying that they are there because we're usually trying to push them away. But remember, the goal of this episode is to explore why they might be there, not trying to find a solution to make them go away. We've talked in the past about anxiety and how it's your brain's way of telling you that you care about something. It is constantly worried that you'll forget it or miss something. And if you're not panicking about it, you're not going to see it. So anxiety tells you to focus more, try harder, and don't fail. Sometimes it does this by telling you that you aren't trying hard enough, that you're going to fail, which is really unfortunate. But if you can sink below that initial thought, that judgment, and see the deeper meaning, you'll see that your anxiety really is trying to help you. If you don't believe me, Watch Inside Out too. I swear, I almost had a panic attack watching it because they described my anxiety almost perfectly. At least how it feels in my head when it's becoming overwhelming, but also the fact that anxiety is trying to protect you. Another uncomfortable emotion that we all feel is anger. Anger shows up differently for different people and stereotypically different across genders too. Women typically struggle to give themselves permission to feel anger because we're supposed to be the caregivers, never angry, always supportive. And if we lash out or get angry, then we're doing something wrong. We're being emotional. So we're supposed to tamp it down. While men typically, stereotypically, are only allowed to feel angry because if they feel anxious or sad or fear, then they're doing something wrong. Anger is often, but not always, a secondary emotion. It is easier to feel angry than to feel another emotion that might be even more uncomfortable. If someone is feeling sad, lonely, rejected, but they're afraid to show it, it could come out as anger or pushing others away. If you are someone, regardless of how you identify, who feels angry the majority of the time, I would be curious about what that means about your experience and what might be happening under the surface behind that anger. Maybe try therapy. See if a professional can support you in exploring how to show up within your internal experience and give yourself permission to let whatever is upsetting you so much exist. Or maybe just find a space where you feel comfortable sitting with yourself and going, wow, I am really fucking sad right now. And that's why I'm lashing out at everybody. Or I am so lonely, or I feel so stuck. And so I can't help but scream at my loved ones. Now, a second way that anger can show up is as a cue that someone is overstepping your boundaries. This is true if you've stated your boundaries clearly, or even if you are not aware that there is a boundary there that someone is crossing. If you want or expect someone to respect your time, personal space, or even your emotional experience, and they just aren't, there is a good chance you'll get angry, irritable, or frustrated with this person. When that happens, and if we don't have the tools and language to verbalize those boundaries and enforce them, that anger is there to protect us, to make sure that we are heard. Now, we're going to move on. So let's talk about sadness next. Sadness can show up alongside so many other things. Grief, loneliness, trauma, nervous system dysregulation, reminiscing about happy moments that you miss. Sadness is your body's cue that something doesn't feel right. Maybe you're miscommunicating with a partner, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot get on the same page. Enter sadness. Maybe you have an injury and it's causing an identity shift, like me with my knee or when I broke my wrist. And I was constantly being reminded of what I couldn't do anymore and uncertain about what my body would be able to do in the future. Enter sadness mixed with grief. Sometimes I just really miss my best friend because she lives so far away. Welcome sadness. Sadness helps us feel what we need to feel when we are processing something that isn't going the way you thought it might or wished it could. Now, grief is separate from sadness, though they are deeply intertwined, because grief exists when you've lost something you loved, which might make you sad. It might not be simple and uncomplicated, but if you are dealing with grief, it is usually a sign that there is some sort of good in that person or thing that you lost. And that good might just be the connection that was there and nothing else, but it might be more. I know every time I lose one of my dogs, there's so much good there and so much love, just pure unconditional love and acceptance. And so my grief is pretty strong. But grief is our body's way of trying to reconcile that something we care about in some way is no longer a part of our external world or day-to-day life. And we need to figure out how to let that person or thing transition into our internal. Last, in this feeling exploration, I want to talk about disgust. I add this one to the list because we talked about it a little bit in my episode with the lovely ladies from STEM. But disgust is how our bodies signal that we don't like something. If we don't like food, if we don't like the way we're being treated, if our values are being crossed or our boundaries are ignored, there might be some disgust in your reaction. If someone's given you the ick, you're feeling a little bit of disgust. This is an important cue to pay attention to because it shows that we might be moving in the wrong direction or trusting someone our bodies do not think we should trust. Slow down. Pay attention to that reaction. You don't necessarily have to believe it at face value, but you can invite curiosity into why that disgust is there and decide if you want to listen to it or not. So next I want to talk about a few emotional experiences. They might not be feelings themselves, but instead reactions to situations that can lead to some uncomfortable feelings that we have. The first is numbness, the lack of feeling. I have so many people in my line of work tell me, I feel numb and it's not good, and I need to figure out how to make this numbness go away. But numbness is a defense mechanism. If what you feel or what you might feel is too strong or your body doesn't know how to feel it yet, it will go numb until it feels safe enough or strong enough to sit in that feeling. Sometimes we really do need to be numb. It only becomes an issue if it is your only means of coping. I'll repeat that. Feeling numb is only an issue if it is the only way that you know how to cope with uncomfortable emotions. If you have other coping skills or you know that you'll eventually be okay, then once you've had distance from the stressor that led you to feeling numb, you'll feel the feelings. You'll move through it and be less numbed or overwhelmed. If numbing is your only coping skill, you'll feel numb. Your body will try to feel and react to your experience, immediately overwhelm you again, and you'll go back to feeling numb. Time only heals wounds if you are actively using that time to heal them. If you are in a constant state of numb, find curiosity around that and look into ways to build your coping skills to sit with your internal experience and hold space. I am not going to lie to you. It sucks. Most of us, if not all of us, hate it. But I like sitting in discomfort because even though I hate it, I know it helps me feel better faster than if I keep pushing it down or away. You will survive that discomfort. I have survived every discomfort I have let myself sit in. And I will find the peace eventually. You will find peace eventually if you let the discomfort exist and find the coping skills to move through it. The second experience I want to talk about is stuckness. Now, it's similar to the experience of numbness, at least in my experience, but feeling stuck is such an important cue, but also incredibly frustrating. Stuckness exists when we are no longer moving in a direction in our lives that works for us, but we don't know where we want to go next. If you knew what you wanted to do instead, you would just pivot and work towards the new thing. You wouldn't feel stuck. The stuckness tells you that you want to change. You just don't know how yet. And that stuckness is going to stick around until you do figure it out. Without that stuckness, we would just continue in the jobs that we hate, relationships that hurt us, friendships that continually cross our boundaries. I wish that we could notice the stuckness and then set a reminder like, thanks, body. I see that I'm not happy here. Can you remind me in 3 months if I haven't changed anything? But that's not how our bodies work. We will continue to feel stuck day in and day out until we can identify what change we want to make and actually take steps to change it. Stuckness is you standing at a crossroads, knowing you don't want to keep going where you were headed, but not knowing which other road you want to take yet. The last experience I want to talk about today is that of comparison. This one has gotten worse with the age of technology, and people love to quote that comparison is the thief of joy. Now, this is true if you take comparison at face value and believe whatever automatic thought your brain is telling you. We are constantly bombarded with social media pages telling us what to do, how to look, where to go, what to eat. And if you don't follow them, you feel like you're doing something wrong and failing. This leads to trouble feeling comfortable in our own skin, pressure to control how we look or what we eat, and forcing ourselves to push away who we are. We stop being authentic. And this hurts worse than if we just stayed true to ourselves and let others think whatever they want about us. Because we are turning all those thoughts inward anyway and continuing to hurt ourselves. Just, we're doing it to ourselves instead of other people judging us, and we can ignore those thoughts. Comparison exists for a reason. Even though it feels like the enemy, it isn't. Comparison keeps us alive. Think in terms of bare bones simplicity. If you and all your friends bought the same meal and everyone ate it, but maybe you weren't hungry yet, so you held off for a second, and everyone got food poisoning, are you going to eat that meal? Probably not. If you are all trying to learn a new skill and one of you figures it out before everybody else, you want to see what that person did to see if that's going to help you develop that skill too. Comparison is a cue to check in and make sure what we are doing works for us. I want to emphasize that it's what works for each of us individually. We are all different. Our minds, bodies, metabolisms, desires, tastes, and needs are all unique. What works for one person will not work for another, and vice versa. And if you notice yourself judging or comparing to others and take that gut reaction as fact, then it will steal your joy. And you will always feel like you're doing something wrong, because there will literally always be someone telling you that what you are doing is unhealthy or bad. Just like there will literally always be someone telling you what you're doing is exactly right. That's what happens when we have social media and every piece of information in the world available to us at our fingertips. You will always have millions of different voices telling you something different. I like to use comparison as a means to check in with what everyone else is doing. But the step that we tend to skip is then checking in with who we are. What are my values, my wants, my needs? And I ask myself, what am I doing? And is it already aligned with the life that I want? In which case, I don't need to change anything. Or if this new concept that the comparison introduced to me might help me embody my values better, well then maybe I should do that. But it's not just because someone told me to, but because I think it's going to help me get to where I want to be. For example, I have a friend who is an ultra marathoner. I have a friend who does Olympic weightlifting. I have a friend who loves to mountain bike. And I have friends who don't like to exercise at all. I myself don't like running ultra long distances. I am not a fan of Olympic weightlifting. And mountain bikes terrify me. But I do love rock climbing, dancing, light running. I enjoy body weight and calisthenic training, and I occasionally include weights in that. I'm currently doing a rings and parallettes workout and focusing on joint strengthening and injury prevention. That isn't going to be everyone's goal. And if I was focused on what everybody else was doing, and if I was comparing and believing my gut reaction, that my mind would be telling me that I wasn't doing enough, that I need to train harder, try harder, and make my body like those things I'm watching other people do. But taking that extra step and using comparison as a cue, I can be happy that my friends found the amount and intensity of movement that works for them, and be grateful for the fact that I've found what helps me recharge, feel strong, And because I found it, I'm going to continue moving throughout my life. If I hated what I was doing and I was only doing it because everybody else was, I probably would have quit a long time ago, which honestly I have with many types of movement I have tried that were not for me. And this is true for exercise, but it's also true for how you feed yourself and what you wear and what you do in your free time and what kinds of friends you surround yourself with and what concerts you go to. All of it is only sustainable if it is true to you and your values. So I'm going to share this. I had a pretty hard week a couple weeks ago. And I noticed myself getting pretty overwhelmed with everything that I was trying to accomplish. And with that, I experienced a lot of these uncomfortable emotions that we are talking about. And nothing happens in isolation. It's not just one, it's usually a mixture of several different feelings, thoughts, reactions that lead to your mental state being what it is. So for me, I was starting to feel anxious, which led to feeling activated in my nervous system, that guilt loop that I mentioned earlier. And because of that anxiety, Juliet was having stomach issues, so I didn't sleep for 3 days straight. This led to incredible exhaustion, which is uncomfortable in its own way. And then on top of that, I also had my to-do list. I was suddenly well out of my depth. I was getting really irritable. Notice the anger on top of feeling anxious, which meant that I was getting really easily frustrated anytime anyone in my life was doing something I didn't expect them to do. And I caught myself several times starting to snap at people. Now, in all my work that I've done on myself, I was able to notice this immediately and correct course by offering repair. Usually it's something like, oof, oh, I am sorry, that came out wrong. I am clearly still irritable. Give me a second and I'll try it again. Or, oof, yep, nope, sleep deprivation and anxiety is getting to me. I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. Let me take a quick break. And I will walk away for 20 to 30 minutes and rejoin the conversation when I feel a little bit more grounded. So again, in this example, I used that discomfort and that reaction I was having as a cue to check in and see what I needed. And what did I end up doing when I had this really hard week? I canceled all of my plans that I was willing to cancel. I slowed down the rest of my life, and I prioritized my mental health, my body, and restoration. I'm honestly not fully out of that loop yet. I think this week has definitely gotten a lot better, but I'm still noticing anxiety popping up in my body as if to check and see if it's really okay to calm down. But each time I am noticing it, I'm checking in with myself, and I can reassure myself and my anxiety that I am, in fact, doing just fine, that I am slowing down intentionally to show my body that it's safe, and I do believe that it will all work out. If I took all of that at face value, I'd probably still be in the loop right now and having regular panic attacks, which is something that I used to do. Anytime I felt this way, I would have panic attacks day and night. And now I just know it's happening and I know I'll be okay. That's what it means to do this work, to notice the parts of you that are showing up, how they're showing up, and what they need. My anxious part really needed to be reassured this week and really needed someone else to come in and set boundaries and be like, hey, no, actually, I can't do all those things. I need rest. And so I gave my body rest, and that anxious part of me is starting to feel better. As I wrap up this episode, I want to bring it back to this idea that everything we experience in our bodies and our minds, the parts of us that show up to different scenarios, they are all trying to help us survive. Our minds are not trying to make us happy. They're trying to keep us alive, and they do a fairly good job of doing this. But sometimes a reaction that has kept us alive for a very long time is suddenly showing up in a way that doesn't seem helpful. It's just a part of us reacting in a very old way that used to be very useful, that hasn't caught up to the present moment yet. And even though this seems very backwards, if you are frustrated with the way that you show up, it might actually be a sign that you have grown enough or you feel safe enough in your current environment that you don't need that reaction anymore. So celebrate the fact that it's not serving you anymore when it probably served you for a very long time. And the only reason you're noticing it now is because maybe you're ready to show up differently. Maybe you don't need that part of you to react in that way anymore. Congratulations, that frustration means that now the internal work can begin. But only if you want it to. It is always your choice. And no one can make you do something you don't want to do. But all these feelings, and the ones I didn't mention today, are a part of the human experience. It is all temporary. Truly, it is. I promise. And the more insight you build, the more you're going to see this pattern where the bad eventually passes and the good takes its place. And then the good will pass and the universe will throw a bunch of shit at you and stress you out. And then you're going to move through it and find the good again. It is a constant push and pull between these experiences. And the more you see that pattern, the more you can believe in yourself and your ability to get through it. And the more curious you can be about why those reactions exist within you. And then you can work on showing up differently. We can all choose to do that work. We can all choose to show up differently. It's just really hard and really scary. And if we are taught that we are not safe, it is a lot harder to do it. So again, maybe we start with that neutral space, finding the moments where you just kind of feel okay and go from there. Hopefully, something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast or any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at insightswithus.podcast or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, visit my website and donate on Podbean's Patreon program or find Insights with Us on buymeacoffee.com. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you're listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.